Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Lots and lots and lots of good conversations happening. I'm going to bring your attention up front, even though you want to talk with your friends and neighbors. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here at Crossroads. Thank you so much for being here at Crossroads. Crossroads is a monthly luncheon of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and really it's about gathering people together, having conversations on important issues that impact our communities, and making sure that we have the ability to have civil dialogue on those important issues. So I'm really glad to have you here. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. I've served in that role for almost 23 years, which I don't know. It's great work, it's hard work, and I'm honored to do it. I have with me also Kristen Clark, who is our communications and admin person. Bridget Fagan-Reedburn is hanging out at Clear Lake. So there you go. On a family vacation. So I'm really glad to have each of you here. I know we have a number of folks that this is their first time with us, whether it's with Crossroads or the other work that we do. So welcome if you are new to us. Welcome if you've been here 482 times. So thank you. We started a new project also, and this conversation today really initiated a new project that we're doing. And so you may have read it in the e-newsletter that we send out on Tuesdays, but we're calling it Understanding Our Neighbors. And it's a project of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and it's intended to help each of us to listen to, and understand those who differ from us or just have different lives than we do. After all, if we don't take time to understand our neighbors, how can we ever move to a world that is less divided? And so we are committed as an organization to create those spaces for dialogue and to do so with civility and respect for one another. I was approached, I don't know, earlier this year, earlier this year, to have a conversation on Judaism and Jewish people and the impact of what's going on in our country, history of anti-Semitism, all of those things. And I was delighted to be able to bring Rabbi Schuster to be part of that conversation. And so Judaism, as you know, I don't want to take all the things that the rabbi is going to say, but Judaism, as you know, is one of the oldest religions in modern times. And so it's important for us to understand, especially those of us who don't practice Judaism, to understand what Judaism is, the experience of Jewish people, and the impact of anti-Semitism in the daily life. And so Rabbi Neal Schuster is the rabbi of Temple B'nai Jeshurun on Grand Avenue in Des Moines. Prior to joining the congregation in 2022, he spent 13 years at the University of Kansas, where he was a rabbi and senior Jewish educator at KU Hillel and a lecturer in the university's Jewish Studies program. Prior to that, he was the associate rabbi at Temple B'nai Yehuda, of course. So when I used to teach Sunday school with kids, and you have all the lists of names and all the list of countries, I just say it with confidence, right?
That's right.
In Overland Park, Kansas, Rabbi Schuster received his master's degree in Jewish education and Hebrew letters, as well as rabbinic ordination from Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles. He is originally from Seattle, where his family goes back generations. Neal is married to Tamara Lawson Schuster, and they have 3 young adult children. In good Jewish fashion, I love this part of your bio, Neal loves questions and insists that no questions are off limits or too outrageous. Please feel free to ask him anything, just don't expect short answers. He is clergy after all. So welcome to Crossroads, welcome to Interfaith Alliance. Thank you so much for being with us.
You might want to hold the applause till you hear what I have to say. I've got 3 microphones here. Hopefully, at least 2 of them work. And I tend to walk around a little bit, so I'm going to just watch the screen from here and make sure I stay within it. This, pulling in to the parking lot, the parking garage, it was one of those times where I had to say, Neal, thou shalt not covet. It's nice. Okay, so I've got 25 minutes to explain Jews, Judaism, and anti-Semitism. So that's at least 10 minutes more than I need. But first of all, right off the bat, why not a simpler title? Why Jews and Judaism? Why can't we just say Judaism? Jews and Judaism it's not necessarily the same thing. Judaism is one thing, and Jews, that's the people, okay? And they're two different phenomena. But already I'm getting a little bit complicated. I want to proceed with 3 narrative touch points, and I'm gonna share these little narrative bits really more briefly than I typically would because we're limited on time. But I want to use them to illustrate a few things about Jews and Judaism and kind of attitudes and ethos, kind of ethos. With young people, I always explain what is ethos. Ethos is vibe. Okay. All right. So narrative touch point number 1 is Book of Genesis, Sodom and Gomorrah. So God hears the cries of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. It says, all right, enough's enough. I'm going to do something. And by the way, the sins of Sodom are not what we typically think. It was cruelty and violence and violations of the norms of hospitality and welcoming. But God says, all right, it's time for a little, good old-fashioned fire and brimstone. But then God says, but wait a minute, Abraham's right there. And Abraham's, he's my guy. We're kind of working together, and I've got special plans for him, and he's got a special role in the world. Shouldn't I share my plans with him? So God goes and tells Abraham God's plans to wipe out Sodom and Gomorrah for their sins. Not just their sins, that sounds so mild. For their awfulness, for their evil, vile cruelty and violence and murderousness. And the response is mind-blowing. Abraham says to God, Chalila lecha, hashofet, and then a few other words, hashofet kol haaretz lo ta'asem mishpat. God, he says to God, Abraham says to God, Chalila lecha. It's difficult to translate this, but really the best way I can render it is disgusting of you. And then one of the most powerful lines, Hashofet kol haaretz lo ta'asem mishpat, shall not the judge of all the earth do justly? Wow. This is Abraham saying this to God. And then Abraham proceeds to, I was thinking how to describe this. One of the classic anti-Semitic, tropes that people will accidentally say, because it's an expression they'll say to Jew someone down, like to bar. But I mean, here's Abraham. Abraham Jews God down. Okay? And he says, are you going to wipe away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there are 50 innocent people in the city? God says, if there are 50 innocent people in the city, I'll spare the whole city. Well, what if that 50 is only missing 5? Okay, for 45. And then Abraham bargains down to 10. If there are 10 innocent people in the city, God will spare the whole city. Abraham only asked for the innocent to be spared, by the way. God said, I'll spare the whole city. Okay? By the way, there weren't. Yeah. But this little narrative touch point, Abraham, disgusting of you, God, shall not the judge of all the earth do justly, and then bargains with God. You want to understand Jewish ethos. Here you have it right there, okay? All right, narrative touch point number 2. Much later, it's a rabbinic story from the Talmud. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. It's a thing that has stories and 6,000 pages of rabbis debating with each other, okay, and telling stories. So this is a really short version of the story, but there's a rabbi, Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, and he is all the other rabbis disagree with him on a point of Jewish law. On basically, it's like, can you clean an oven this way if it's become impure, like if an animal died in it? And he says, yes, you can. Everyone else says no. And he brings every argument to try to convince them. And they say, no, we're sticking with our guns. This is where we rule, and that's what it is. And Eliezer, he starts to get frustrated because he feels that he's right, and he is, by the way. And he says, in the Talmud, the rabbis often have kind of like magic rabbi powers. And he says, if I'm right, let this tree prove it. And the tree is uprooted from the ground, and it moves 400 cubits. Although there are some versions that say 700 cubits. Now you understand. That's Judaism right there. Although, and the other rabbis say, that's a great trick. What does the tree have to do with it? Well, if I'm right, let the stream prove it. And the stream flows backwards. Great, what does that have to do with it? If I'm right, let the walls of the house of study prove it. And they start to fall inward. And a rabbi jumps up and says, hey, when rabbis are discussing points of Jewish law, what business is it of yours to interfere? So the walls stop, tilting in, and they remain leaning in the middle to this day out of respect for this side and the other side. Finally, Rabbi Eliezer says, if I'm right, then let a voice from heaven declare it. At which point, a bat kol, which is the rabbinic term for a heavenly voice, which means the daughter of the voice, okay, which is a beautiful idiom. I just love it. It's that a heavenly voice is the daughter of the voice, which is like an echo. It's not the direct voice, because our heads would explode. And a heavenly voice comes forth and says, why are you arguing with Rabbi Eliezer about this? Don't you know he's right about every matter of Jewish law that you're debating? He's right. At which point, one of the other greatest rabbis of the generation, Rabbi Joshua, leaps up and points to the heavens and says, Lo b'shamayim hi, quoting Deuteronomy, says, the Torah is not in heaven. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses. This is the basis of everything for us, okay? The basis of our commandments, of everything. He says, shouts to the heavens, the Torah is not in heaven. From a passage in Deuteronomy, which we could spend a whole time discussing, but this is amazing. And what he's saying is, you gave the Torah to us. It's our gift. It's a gift you gave to us. It doesn't belong to you anymore. You can't tell us what to do with it, what it means. You gave it to us. It's up to us now to grapple with it, to wrestle with it, to interpret it. And later in the story, a rabbi meets Elijah the prophet and says, hey, what did God say? What did God do at that time? And Elijah the prophet says, God laughed and said, Nitzchuni b'nai, my sons have overturned me. My sons have overturned me. God in this moment was delighted. The same way I was delighted the first time my son beat me in chess. I never let him win. And so he knew when he finally beat me, he really beat me. So God's delighted in this moment. One more narrative touch point, and that is the shores of the Red Sea. The Exodus from Egypt, and the Israelites are standing at the shores of the Red Sea, nowhere to go because the sea hasn't parted yet. Behind them are Pharaoh's army, and everyone's freaking out. And Moses starts crying out to God, starts praying basically. And God says to Moses, I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but God says to Moses, Moses, why are you praying? Stop crying out to me and do something. And that, do something, that's Judaism. If you ask a Jew, what do Jews believe? What is the answer you're most likely to get? Judaism is not about what you believe, it's about what you do. And this can be a little difficult. It's not difficult to understand, but it's difficult to understand in the context of understanding Judaism as a religion. In part, because Judaism is not a religion. In the conventional sense, Judaism is not a religion. It's not about what you believe. It's not about a proclamation of faith. So what is it? Well, in academic terms, people will say, oh, well, it's not a religion. It's an ethno-religion, which is not so helpful. What does that mean? It's not even an ethno-religion, really. When people say that, they mean it has an ethnic component, okay? Avram Infeld, who I'm not going to explain who he is. He's a person. He says this stuff, okay? Avram Infeld likes to say to groups of young Jews, Judaism's not a religion, it's a family. And I think in a lot of ways that's a useful way of understanding it. It's a family because what does it mean to be in a family? Family means it's something you belong to. It's something you're a part of. It's a thing that has traditions, has customs, has norms and mores, things that you do, things that you don't do, things that evolve over time, and it has people who are born into it and people who join it. In a lot of ways, that does explain what Judaism is. It's a family. And there are Jews who do nothing Jewish who are still Jews. And just because a person does Jewish things doesn't make them Jewish, but a person can become Jewish. One of the, it's not a religion, it's a family, but it's a family, and part of the core, and what those narrative touch points highlight. The first, we argue with God, we bargain with God to get to what we think is acceptable. That we tell God, you gave it, it's like, if I give you a sweater for your birthday, I can't tell you when you can wear the sweater. It's like, God, you gave us the Torah, it's ours now, okay? And stop praying and do something. It's a family, we are a people in relationship with God. And some ways of thinking about that relationship, none of them are exact, but in some ways, it's like the relationship between a parent and a child, in the sense that everyone who raises a child needs to understand we don't raise children, we raise grown-ups. That we want our children to think for themselves, to be their own people. We don't want them, a child who does everything that we tell them, we're a little concerned, okay? It's also, another analogy is it's like a marital relationship. That two people in partnership as equals, but also each get something from the other. Helpmeets, helpers who are equal to each other. So both of these, in the marital analogy, what is the marriage contract, what we call the ketubah? The Torah, the 5 books of Moses. This is our core, this is the source of our commandments, and it does not mean law. It means teaching, teacher. The root of Torah is the same root that gives us the word for teacher. By the way, the word for parents, like mom and dad, parents, same root. So what are parents? Parents should be teachers. Okay? And that's how we look at it. When we look at Torah, we say, what is it teaching us? And by the way, you can't just, people have to say, I'm just going to read the Torah, I'll do just what the Torah says. It's not possible. You can't, because you read something and it demands interpretation. You can't just take it at its simple face value, because that's not how it works. That you have to grapple with it, you have to struggle with it. And in fact, that idea of struggle, and I've used that idea a couple of times already, that is who we are. It's very difficult in terms of language, because the name for the Jewish people is Israel. Am Yisrael, B'nai Israel, the people of Israel, the children of Israel, or in brief, Israel. And so when I talk about Israel, am I talking about the people? Am I talking about the land? Am I talking about the state? But our name as a people is Israel. And what does that mean? To struggle with God, to wrestle with God. And that's who we are. We are a people who wrestle with God, which means that we are in engagement with God. We're not ignoring God. And that also describes how we approach our texts and our tradition. We grapple with it. We demand, what do you mean? What can this mean? How can I understand this? So that's an essential component of it. Now, I had some ideas of what I wanted to talk about. Let's see how I'm doing. All right, I've got 8 minutes. So there's another thing that is very difficult to understand about Judaism in the context of the framework, thinking of it as a religion. Our goal is not for everyone to become Jewish. It's just not. That's not what we're looking for. And that seems kind of strange. Now, we do have a goal, it's included in our liturgy even. We would like to see everyone become good. Okay? And to put it in theological terms, we even have a vision of everyone acknowledging the one God as the source of everything, including the idea of what's right, what's wrong. Okay? And that's the idea that we are all from the same place, that we all have the same God, and right and wrong is right and wrong. So but we have no interest in like everyone becoming Jewish. That's not our goal. That is a really powerful distinction. The idea of kind of the non-universality of the expansion is sort of like, you got to be like us in that sense. That's very, very different, but you can become Jewish. We're not like, recruiting necessarily, but it is possible. It goes back to that image of family. You can join a family. You can be a part of it. A person can become Jewish, but you don't need to be in order to kind of get all the benefits. I need, a little bit in terms of like, you can't do certain rituals, but the benefits on a kind of big level of like, to have a part in the world to come, so to speak, to be seen well or in favor with God, anything like that. You don't have to be, but you can become Jewish. And it's Elijah the prophet calling to correct me on something. By the way, you want to understand Judaism? Here we go. That's all of Judaism. So, Judaism is a system that is a non-exclusive particularism. A non-exclusive particularism, and that is in contrast with exclusive particularism. Systems of, and I have to say, Israel Zangwill in 1912 first wrote about this, and in comparing the Teutonic or Aryan ideal with the Hebraic. Okay? A system of exclusive particularism is one where you cannot join. You're either in it or you're out, and you have to be in it in order to reap the benefits, in order to be part of the chosen group, the benefiting group, the saved group, anything like that. And system of non-exclusive particularism, such as Judaism, you can join it, but you don't need to, and you don't have to be in it to experience those benefits of being favored or saved or anything like that. That is very unusual. And one of the challenges, you wanted to hear a little bit, or I was asked to talk a little bit about anti-Semitism. One of the sources of anti-Semitism is the tension between Judaism and its non-exclusive particularism and other systems that insist you have to be a part of it. And that's not just a religious phenomenon. It's also a modern phenomenon in terms of social, political, economic visions and movements that demand you have to be part of this system. that it's everyone's got to be on board. And you know what's really frustrating about us? No thanks. We've got our own transportation. So, and that actually is really something very, very powerful about Jewish tradition. And we are, as the Torah says, a stiff-necked people. If the Torah came out today, the Anti-Defamation League would have a fit and say it was anti-Semitic, okay? Because we're very self-critical. The problem is when everyone else wants to, get on board with that self-criticism. But we throughout history, we are not willing to go along and give up our ways, our particularism. We don't demand others be a part of it, join us. Are we chosen? I mean, the idea of chosenness is what's so frustrating for so many people, is not us claiming we're chosen. I mean, what are we? We're like, 0.2%. We're nothing. It's believing that we're chosen. That's what's annoying. That's what's frustrating. And by the way, chosen for what? It's like being chosen to clean the bathroom. Okay? Chosen for a job. And what is that job? We say in our liturgy all the time that thank you, God, for giving us a particular role among the nations. Not that we're better than anyone else, which the Torah is very clear, that's not it. But we have a particular role. And our particular role is we are here to be in partnership with God in the ongoing work of creation, in making this world better and fixing what is broken. We're not the only ones who can work on this project, but we are called to work on it in particular. Making the world better and fixing what is broken. That's what we're chosen to do. Like I said, like being chosen to clean the bathroom. This idea of particularism and exclusivism is a big part of what goes on in anti-Semitism, because it is so enraging often, and it creates a presence. When Jews say, okay, yeah, we want to keep working on this, and fine, you go do your thing, but we're not going to join it and be a part of it. We won't, even if we're not going to fight it, that interferes with whatever vision, whether it's a vision of a communist utopia, we can process that, separate, or if it's another religious vision where everyone is a part of that structure, that our presence as an outsider, as different, interferes with the kind of the uniformity of that universal vision. But we are about achieving the universal by means of the particular. What do I mean by that? What the Torah says, and Jesus repeats, love your neighbor as yourself. The sentence ends, I am God, by the way. We leave that off, but love your neighbor as yourself. What a small-minded provincial thing to say. What, I should love my neighbor? What about this person over here? Why shouldn't I love them too? Why doesn't it say love everyone? Wouldn't that be more beautiful? Love everyone? Very easy, because there's no such person as everyone. But your neighbor whose dog poops in your yard, whose leaves clog your lawn, that's a person that's a real person and can be difficult to love. Okay? That a better world does not begin with that universal vision. It begins with what we call tachlis, brass tacks. It begins by loving an actual person, by treating an actual person decently, by extending a hand in help to an actual person, not to everyone. We make the world better one person, one moment, one action at a time. Stop praying and do something. This is Judaism. I'm gonna bring it home, sort of, because it's gonna open something else. There is, of course, a famous summary of all of Judaism. It's over 2,000 years old, and it comes from the sage Hillel. I say sage because in the first century before the Common Era, he wasn't quite a rabbi. They didn't have rabbis back then, blah, 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 blah. Hillel. Hillel was famously unflappable, which is a great word, by the way. Hillel was famously unflappable, and people would always come to him, try to get him riled up, and all kinds of things. One day, a Roman soldier comes to him and says, if you can teach me the entire Torah, all of Judaism, Jewish tradition, while standing on one foot, then I'll become Jewish. He actually first went to another sage, Shammai, who was highly flappable. Shammai chased him away with his yardstick. And then he went to Hillel, and Hillel stood on one foot, and he said, what is hateful to you, do not do unto others. All the rest is commentary. Now go and learn. That last bit's important. All the rest is commentary. Go and learn. Because it does require commentary. There are details to it. But if you're going to walk around with one principle that you can, that's my measure of doing something. What is hateful to you, do not do unto others. All the rest is commentary. I remember when I was younger, I used to look at this and say, this is so Jewish. Why do we have to be this way? Everyone else has the golden rule that is positive. Why have we got to have the negative one? I mean, it's very Jewish. Until I realized there's a beauty and a brilliance to it. And to be consistent, I will use the example I always use. I like broccoli. If you come to my house, that doesn't mean I should feed you broccoli. Maybe you don't like broccoli. Just because, the idea of do unto others, just because I like something doesn't mean you like it. On the other hand, I know that if I don't like being smacked upside the head, there's a pretty good chance you don't like being smacked upside the head. It's a pretty good metric. If I hate it, I shouldn't do it to someone else. And this is, on many levels, baseline. This is what we want in the world. Don't be rotten. Don't be awful. If we could achieve that, as we say at our Passover Seder, dainu, enough. That would be enough. Every act of beauty and decency on top of that would just be bonus, gravy. But if we could just achieve, don't be rotten. By the way, rotten is not my first choice of words. All the rest is commentary. Now go and learn. Now, my time is up and then some. So I'm going to save where I was going to go from there. I have a question for you, all of you, but some of you may have some questions for me. So I'm going to step down. All the rest is commentary. Go and learn. There you go. Let's open the floor. I say with trepidation.
I don't know. I feel like he covered so much in 25, 30 minutes. So it is our habit with Crossroads for you to raise your hand, and I bring you the microphone, and you can get my attention ahead of the next question so that I know where I'm going next. And please don't speak without the microphone because people in the room can't hear, and certainly people online can't hear as well. So if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you.
Great. Thank you, Rabbi, for your words here. It's very helpful to learn more about Judaism. Excuse me. Oh, it was very helpful to me to learn more about Judaism, particularly as you spoke about it being something. Okay. Thank you for your presentation today, and it's very helpful for me to learn more about Judaism, particularly as you spoke about how it's something one does. I'm going to raise the question, I can't disassociate the question from contemporary politics, and it's the nature in Judaism of the goyim. And technically other nations may mean, but it has historically acquired a pejorative meaning. And I've not heard in Judaism communities or in communities here a discussion of that bias. I'll call it a bias. I've experienced it personally. I have worked closely with Jewish people and with Jewish communities over the years. And I think there is an issue there about reconciliation that is consistent with the issue of reducing anti-Semitism. And so my question is, what is the issue of goyism, if you want to call it that? I'm a goy, right? Maybe I'm not so smart, et cetera, et cetera. Could you sort of explain about that? Because I don't think it's well discussed. That's my question.
So I want to hone in on a question like, what are Jews' problems with goyim? Okay, with goys, is that kind of what you're like? Is goy a non-Jew a pejorative? Okay, so first of all, a goy is not a non-Jew in its linguistic sense. In its conventional use, in its idiomatic use, it is. But the word goy just means nation, and the Jewish people are called a nation, a goy. We are called to be a goy kadosh, a holy nation. So it's not necessarily pejorative. A lot of it depends on the tone. Like, a Shabbos goy who comes over during the Sabbath and lights the oven or something like that can say, "This is my Shabbos goy," and you're delighted. But if someone says, "Ugh, goyim," that's not a compliment. It's also it's not nice. And that's one of those distinctions between Jews and Judaism. Judaism does not hold that attitude, but sometimes Jews do, and sometimes they hold that attitude, sometimes out of their experiences. But Judaism itself, so many of the great heroes of biblical narrative are not Jews, are not Israelites. Throughout, and there is nothing that is fundamentally negative about the other at all. But attitudes in the modern world, I think that a lot of it comes from a concern, a sense of mistrust. And I will say, as you mentioned, modern political landscape. For generations, the majority of Jews have consistently been politically liberal, vote Democrat, and all leaning in that particular direction. Jews have allied themselves, completely, not just allied themselves with liberal causes, have been at the forefront of it. And yet, I got to tell you, Jews are feeling pretty betrayed. Like, wow, did not take much for everything on that side of the spectrum to just turn against us. Well, Zionism is not, okay. Then why are you rejecting, Jews from panels, Jews from medical groups, Jews from publishing, Jews from everything? It's not about politics or Zionism or anything. We feel really betrayed, like we have been at the forefront. We've dedicated ourselves to these causes, and it doesn't take much for things to turn against us, for people to turn against us. And, it is dredging up a lot of the sense of concern, danger that most of us thought we would never experience or deal with. I didn't grow up with anti-Semitism. I mean, it just wasn't something I experienced. For most of my life, I was someone who said, like, can we stop? Can we stop already? Like, enough with the anti-Semitism. Like, this is not the world we live in. But you know what? All of a sudden, this is the world we live in. It's a terrifying time, an unsettling time to be a Jew in the world, not just here, not just there, in the world, everywhere. And it's a tough thing, and especially given the complexity of where that's coming from. I don't know if that's anywhere in the neighborhood of what you were asking or not, but I have nothing against the goy per se. Like, in fact, we should love, commandment, love the stranger. Like, we are commanded to love the stranger, to love the other. And in fact, in the Talmud, the rabbis discuss, because it's a commandment, it's a mitzvah to visit the sick, to comfort the bereaved. Should Jews visit the sick among the non-Jews, comfort the bereaved among the non-Jews? The answer is absolutely, 100%, for the sake of peace, for the sake of brotherhood and getting along and everything like that. Absolutely. So there's no fundamental separation that we have to maintain or dislike that is inherent.
This question may seem far afield, but I wonder if you could just say a few things about Jewish concepts and beliefs about afterlife. Because Judaism teaches that you must cite your sources, I will cite my source for this, which will rile up more than a few people. Dennis Prager has a great way that he responds to this. He says, does Judaism believe there's something after this life? The answer is yes. Now let's talk about something else. My other favorite take on it is a writer who says, anyone who tells you they're going to give you a clear and comprehensive explanation of Jewish views of the afterlife doesn't know what they're talking about. There is, contrary to what a lot of Jews are brought up thinking, there is a Jewish view, there are Jewish views of the afterlife. None of it is clear or definitive, but yes, there's a sense that there's something after this life. There's also a very strong concern that if we spend our time talking about it, focusing on it, that it will become our focus, that we will be distracted from this life, this world. This is where we are supposed to be doing our job, our business, our work. And whatever is next, we'll find out when the time comes.
Thank you very much for being here. Several years ago, I spent a month in Israel for Holocaust studies. And the one thing I learned and came home with was never again. And that's what I took back to the classroom. That's what I took inside me. I mean, I feel so committed to that. And so I've written a letter, letters to the editor about that message. And what I've invited in that letter is conversations with the Jewish people, with just like this, conversations about help me understand why when I challenge something, I'm called anti-Semitic. And yet one of the things I love about the Jewish tradition is their love of questions. I mean, that there's always a question. There's always another way. I mean, it's awesome. So how do we have those conversations that challenge? And there's a fear of being labeled anti-Semitic. I have very good friends who are Jewish, and they don't want to talk about the things that are going on now, because they feel like they are betraying their tradition.
So
I know
this is a great question, and it's such a challenging one. And I think that we Jews do have a bit of a labeling problem with anti-Semitism. I'm a person, I have a big problem with the excessive use of labels because they become unhelpful. There's oftentimes a lot of debate. Is this anti-Semitism? Is it not anti-Semitism? Like, why is that? Why are we debating? It is, it isn't. It's like we're sitting there trying to figure out which box to put it in, okay? And once we put a label on it, then we can stop. Okay, now we know what it is. I think it's much, and we do that with everything, by the way. I think it's much more helpful to actually describe what's going on, to actually talk about the thing, as opposed to trying to label it one thing or another. But what you're describing in terms of your experience is a real challenge. How can a person who is not for the destruction of Israel be critical of Israel without people thinking, something about them? And it's a very difficult thing to do. There is a huge difference between criticizing something or someone that you love and criticizing something or someone that you despise. There's a difference between, hey, you want to hear the things I think are wrong in America? I mean, we're going to need more than an hour, okay? But come, listen to me talk on 4th of July. I love America. I love the idea of America. I even love the reality of America with its imperfections, and I want to see it become better. That's very different from, I'll tell you what's wrong with America, and it's rotten to the core and it should be destroyed. Those are two very different things. And when we hear the din of cries and criticism that is accompanied by the sentiments of, I have criticism of Israel, which, by the way, should not exist in the first place. That's where we don't like to hear those criticisms because they're not coming from they're not well-intentioned. But not every criticism is like that. You want to hear criticism of Israel? Hang out with Jews. And you should be free to criticize Israel while supporting it. And that's a real challenge. Yeah. What? It's a hard question. There's more that I want to say about it. And I think this really captures just so much that here's another thing. And this will address, I'm sure, some other questions. You want to sit down and have those conversations. We should have those conversations. Here is what's challenging. And here's why I think so many Jews reach for just that label maker. Anti-Semitic, okay, put that on there, okay? It's because so much of the discourse is predicated on stuff that's just not true. Just outright lies. And how do we move forward in a conversation when the premise that people are operating from is like, this isn't true? And that's the case with words like genocide and apartheid and all of these things, which, again, labels. What use is it? You want to talk about it? Let's talk about what is actually happening instead of deciding what label to put on it. It's also, when we look at, it is one of the things that's so hard and so frustrating
is we want to talk about this. We want to discuss this. We're agonizing over everything about this because the world is a mess and people are suffering, and we don't want to see that. Every human being is made in the image and likeness of God, and the death, the untimely death and the violent death of any of God's likenesses is a tragedy. And yet every time we turn around, there's another just outright lie. And I mean, you see it in the newspaper headlines. Huge lie, why you should be mad at the Jews, according to Hamas. So, and then a week later, well, it turns out maybe that wasn't entirely correct. But you know what? That huge lie, that's the one that gets traction, that inflames hatred. You want to know why? We're scared because every day someone is lying out there in a way that makes people hate us, in a way that makes people want to kill us, do violence against us. It's frightening out there. It hits close to home. And it makes it so that everything we do, we have to think, will it be safe? And, you know, falsehood is corrosive. That doesn't mean we're right or that everything we do is right. But we can't get anywhere. We can't discuss how things can be better if the ground that everyone is walking on is made of lies. So what we need, I don't want to end on that, with that. What we need is some truth. And we need truth about ourselves. And the world needs truth so that we can actually discuss things, because all of these struggles that go on in the world, and I'm going to wrap it up here, and I know there are other questions, I'm happy, but I'm watching the clock, which there are 3 different times. Among clock makers, clock repair, there's a saying: if you have a clock in your house, you know what time it is. If you have more than one clock in your house, you're never really sure. Now I forgot what I was going to say. All of these struggles in the world that we see, and struggles that we experience between people, that the ancient rabbis talk about the difference between machloket l'shem shamayim, machloket shelo l'shem shamayim. That disagreements, conflicts that are for the sake of heaven, and conflicts that are not for the sake of heaven. Conflicts that are not for the sake of heaven are conflicts that are about power, about position, about winning by defeating the other party. And as the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, liked to talk about, that in a conflict that is not for the sake of heaven, if I win and you lose, we both have lost. Because in my winning, I have diminished your humanity. And the contrast is conflict that is for the sake of heaven, is conflict where what you're striving for is truth, is greater understanding, is a place where both people can inhabit together. In a conflict for the sake of heaven, everyone wins because we've found some truth. We've found a place that both of us can occupy instead of a place where there's a winner and a loser and both are actually losers. That all of these conflicts, can we have some disagreements for the sake of heaven? I don't want to win by defeating someone else. And I will say bluntly, Israel, and I truly believe, Israel is not looking to destroy everyone, to be the conqueror on the top of the hill. Israel just wants to live, a place where we can where we can live, where we can be together. Is where, I mean, I talked to Israelis who, like, when they were kids, would get on their bicycles and ride down into Gaza City from nearby because that's where the best hummus was. Hummus, by the way, hummus. That we just want to live. And frankly, I want nothing more than to see everyone in the region live in safety, security, freedom, prosperity. Like, we're cousins. Why can't we should be living together and in friendship and love and partnership. Let our conflicts be for the sake of heaven, so that wherever we go with them, they lift us up. Because this world is a beautiful world, and it's meant to be lived in and enjoyed and loved in, and we should be together with each other. Let's make things better.
So I'm going to take some executive privilege and ask the last question. You talked about loving your neighbors, and that neighbors is individual, but it's also everyone that you deal with and everyone that you interact with. I can love all of my family. I can love...
That's an accomplishment.
And I have a cousin who would have been at January 6th, but I still love him. I can love my neighbors who shovel my driveway and, take care of my dog. I can love my family in my house of worship. I can love everybody in this room. How do I love somebody who harms other people intentionally, like Bob Vanderplatz? He is a Christian nationalist in Iowa, leader of the family leader. How do I love somebody who creates harm and does so from a place of, in my opinion, evil? How are they my neighbor?
Yeah, so this is, of course, a great challenge, and it's the kind of addendum to all of the beautiful ideas. What about, what is hateful to you, don't do unto others? Okay. What about people who do the hateful stuff? And, most of you are familiar with the expression, hate the sinner, not the sin, which, comes from Jewish tradition. Or hate the sin, not the sinner. Just checking if you're paying attention. This idea comes from Jewish tradition, as after all, Jesus was a Jew, and he's always quoting Jewish scriptures. And there's a famous story about Rabbi Meir and his wife Bruria, same thing. In Psalms, we read, Ovei Hashem sinu ra, those who love God must hate evil. Interestingly, it's sinu ra, not rasha'im. Hate evil, not the evildoers. Okay? But there is a commandment to hate evil. And that's really difficult. It's not to hate the evildoers, to hate evil. However, sometimes on a very practical level, that there's no more the evil, let's bring the evildoer away from their evil. That the evildoer is doing their evil, they're not going to stop, and the only way to stop them is to stop them. And we learn from the example, God hates evil. God hates cruelty. When people are cruel and evil, it makes God sad, the way it makes a parent sad to see their children be cruel to each other. And part of fixing the world means that we have to combat evil in this world. And we try to stop it before it gets to a point where it can't be stopped, where people can't be changed. But if it gets beyond that point, we have to use force to do so. That is absolutely not what we want.
but it is a part of the world that we live in. And I think even when it, and really, there are two questions. One is about using force against evildoers, and the other, the one that you asked, is about hate, feeling hate. And we have to be very careful about nurturing hate in our hearts, because on some levels, it feels so good. It feels so good to nurture that hate, to nurture that anger, to become self-righteous about it. And that is a temptation that is dangerous to lean into, because once we have the can of paint open and the paintbrush is wet, we just start painting everything with it. And then we stop making distinctions between truly, irredeemably evil that must be stopped and I don't like it. So we should hate evil. We should fight evil. We should do everything we can to remove evil from the world, recognizing that sometimes that means removing evildoers. That is not desirable. It is not valiant or heroic. It is an awful reality that sometimes that we have to live with. And it does. Look at King David not being able to build the temple because he had too much blood on his hands. It separates us from God. Much better to nurture love in our hearts, but evil is a part of the world.
Help me to thank Rabbi Neal Schuster. So grateful for your message. So grateful that you took the time to be here and to be with us. Just very grateful. For those of you who are in the room, thank you for being here and taking the time to do that as well. If you are new, as I said, we hope that you will be part of the work. Join us again, whether it's Crossroads or in the work we do across the state. And for those online, thank you for joining us as well. We are not going to have Crossroads in July. We're taking a little break just for a month, but we will be back in August. And so look for that information as it comes out, and have a great weekend. Thank you.